a higher speed. And unfortunately, if, for instance, a driver misses a stop sign, it can result in catastrophic injury or sometimes death can occur just because of the speeds and the impact. If that same disobeying of a stop sign occurs in the city, speeds are much lower, and we don't end up with the fatal consequence. That is an area that our traffic enforcement and units and all of our outlying districts that have those rural areas focus their attention on, and we do our best to try and curtail the issue. And again, the challenge with that is that because traffic is not as heavy as it is in the more built-up areas of the region, it unfortunately is a hit-and-miss scenario. And a lot of those accidents, again, I think predominantly occur late at night and in the early morning hours. So we do focus on it, and I think they do a great job, and our stats have borne that out over the years, where we've gone from having a very high number of fatalities, where we unfortunately led the province at one point, but we've curtailed those numbers dramatically through our education and enforcement efforts.
Okay, so my point would have been that if there's a high...
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to comment on the RIDE program comparison, and that it appears as if the message is getting out, and that although we did... my items start on number... it's item number 171. It's the last page, number 4. This was under under robberies, which is a January. It's actually it's it's last year's statistic, showing 141 reported. Take out of that the 16 unfounded. We cleared by charge. We still had 57 unsolved. What is the probability of bringing closure to those 57 unresolved robberies?
Through you, Mr. Chair. At this point in time, those investigations, the investigators have exhausted all investigative leads on those. The reality is, though, that information could come forward. We always encourage members to come through Crime Stoppers to report information, any tips, and they may be suspended investigations at this point in time. They're always available to us to reopen if additional information comes forward.
Okay, thank you.
On this item, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, and through you. Just wanted to make note, Member Gansell referred to Exhibit 4, and when I do my elementary math, back in 07-08, on an annualized basis, we were at about the 60% level for unresolved, and we've moved steadily through the 50s to last year, where in fact we're down to 40% of those reported that are unresolved. So it's been a marked improvement in terms of our ability to bring these issues to a close. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and through you, I'm just curious with all the previous years. So for 2016, I'm assuming as of December 31st, there were 57 unsolved at that point in time. But I'm just curious of the previous years unsolved, what information do we have about how many of those actually get solved, even though it might be a year or two later? Perhaps you make a robbery arrest and are able to trace that particular person or persons back to some previous crimes. So with this, I'm assuming these numbers are whatever's unsolved at the end of the year, but they may be solved later on. I'm just kind of curious of how we would know that and how we would find out if these numbers, historical numbers, are actually being reduced over time.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'll have our analysts look at this. I'm not sure if when they're doing the stats for these reports, if they're actually looking at the updated numbers and reporting on what occurred the previous year based on updates, but or if they're using the raw data that they had from the year before. My best instinct is that they're doing an update on it, so that if last year may have shown let's say 54 unsolved, where now it's showing 50 solved, but I'll clarify that and get back to you. Thanks.
Okay, so I'm going to interrupt this for 1 second. We're live now, correct? I am correct? Okay, I'd like to welcome any of the public that's watching this to the July 27th, 2017 Police Service Board meeting here in Niagara Falls. We started earlier, about 15 minutes ago, because we had technical difficulties and we didn't know when the YouTube would be coming up. At present, we have, and this is where I have to apologize, we have Acting Chief Brian McCulloch, Deputy Chief Bill Forty, and Acting Chief Brett Flynn. We will shorten that up to Chief McCulloch and Deputy Chief Lynn, just in the interest of time, and if we make mistakes on it, that's criticizes if you wish. And as far as that, we've held off on the on Chief McCulloch's comments so that they could go public. So we're right now in the consent items. We're going to finish that, and then we'll come back to Chief McCulloch's comments and that. So we've only got a few more consent items, I would think, to come up. Am I correct in that, or is there a lot?
I have a few.
You have a few?
Yeah.
Are we done with that one item you just had?
Mm-hmm.
Let's finish the consent items.
Okay.
Go ahead.
This one is item 175, and my only comments on that is I'm glad to see that the police service dogs are now reporting about 13 in number of calls, so they're obviously getting used. So that's a good use of our resources, and kudos to that area of the service and their work. Consent goes up to what?
Any other comments on 175? Okay, I have one comment or question on it. The police dogs, that's a good news story for us. We're proud of our training for other forces. Who is the gentleman that's in charge of that, or the lady that's in charge of that here? Is there anyone here from K9?
Superintendent Brian Ash is here, that oversees our K9 unit, as one of many units that he oversees.
Oh, my kudos to you and your team for that. A question for you. Do we use our dogs anywhere else? I know we train other forces, but do we ever send them to Canada Customs or other places to be used in case they don't have one? Do we share?
Yes, sir. On many circumstances where we do joint force or joint agency operations, we will share, including with Niagara Parks Police and doing the large events that take place in Niagara Falls, like the New Year's Eve celebration. So very often we're sharing the resources. So
when it's something big and it's programmed in advance, do we charge for that? Or, and I'm not looking to ask for charges, but it's an obvious question. If it's like a New Year's Eve thing where you know 3 months in advance that you're going to be using them, is there a charge for that?
No, there's not. It's part of our operations, knowing that we will be involved in the event, that proactively will go out, especially if we're using the explosive detection.
Okay, well, my kudos to you and your team, because it's nothing but good news on that.
Thank you.
Any other comments on the K9 unit situation? Okay, Ken, it's back up to you.
Okay, thank you. Where do we end on the consent again?
175 you just had.
That's the end of it? Okay, I'm concluded. Thank you. I have other, not in the consent component. Thank you.
Any other questions on consent items? Member Bonham.
Yes, thank you, Chair. At the risk of being repetitious, I want to return to item 170, and that's with regard to traffic management, enforcement, and road safety. And as I commented earlier, I don't know if it's best to discuss this issue at 170 or under 177, which has to do with emergency planning.
Doesn't matter, whatever you choose.
And I refer to the incident we had I guess in July or perhaps June this year with regard to a truck that breached the median in the area of St. Catharines, Martindale Road area, as I recall, that precipitated an evacuation. And the concern at previous meetings was with regard to traffic management to and from an evacuation site, and with regard to what we might be doing or we have done to manage traffic away from an evacuation area much more quickly than possibly we have in the past, and further what we can put in place from a collective perspective to inhibit traffic headed towards the area of concern. And I was advised that there was going to be a meeting with the emergency planners in Niagara to pursue those issues. So I'm just wondering if there's an update today. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the incident you're referring to was a collision that occurred on July 17th, where members of our service participated, occurred on June 13th, and on July 17th, it was members of our service participated in a debrief regarding that truck rollover in St. Catharines. The debrief was organized by the St. Catharines Fire Service, who was the lead agency in the incident. Following agencies were in attendance for that incident: St. Catharines Fire, OPP, Ministry of Health, MTO, the region, Niagara EMS, Emergency Management Ontario, Transport Canada, the phosphine manufacturer distributor, the St. Lawrence Seaway, TerraPure, City of St. Catharines, and the Province of Ontario. So a lot of stakeholders were in attendance for that. The debrief reviewed the handling of the incident itself and the evacuation/shelter-in-place order, the traffic impact on the city and the region, and the communication between agencies and communication overall with members of the public. Overall, it was agreed that the incident was extremely well handled and that the unified command structure worked very well. Specifically, all stakeholders were very happy with the response and actions by the Niagara Regional Police Service. The main debrief takeaway points directly affecting the Niagara Regional Police were that there needed to be clarification on who has authority to order evacuations in these circumstances and how it is enforceable by the police. The need to provide ongoing education to the public so that they understand the terminology shelter in place and what exactly that means. The need to capitalize on technology such as reverse 911, 211, and 511 capabilities. And an affirmation that the NRPS, the Niagara Regional Police Service is the most effective key media distributor during events such as this. Also discussed in the response to the inquiries by the board was significant impact that traffic congestion had on the immediate area. It was learned that the capability of the region to control traffic lights during a scenario such as this is very limited and cannot be currently utilized to help in these types of situations. The region and the province are, however, working on a long distance and long duration road closure plan that would significantly assist incidents such as this in the future. The results of that planning should be coming out shortly. From our perspective going forward, we would certainly capitalize or leverage the use of our auxiliaries for any future incidents so that we can assist with traffic control going forward. But all in all, the stakeholders were quite pleased with how well the event was handled, and in a great example of emergency service providers working well and collaborating together.
So just to follow that up, Acting Chief McCulloch, is given that there's limited ability to control traffic signals at the present, and there's some consideration being given to road closures, is there also a companion initiative to move forward with regard to improving our ability from the regional standpoint to control traffic signals so that we build in as much as we possibly can to get people away and stop others from moving towards the problem? Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair, it's my understanding that the focus was more, because of the restrictions or limitations on the lights to be able to control them better. I think the focus was more on the planning for the routes of evacuation, so that, rerouting of the traffic, so that you avoided those vehicles that were being rerouted from the QEW into the city. You have them rerouted much earlier so that they're going into the rural areas, and it wouldn't cause as much traffic congestion. But that's something that the province and the region are working together, and we're hopeful that that comes out shortly.
Thank you. I'm just wondering if we might not, as a board, be penning a bit of memorandum to the region to ask that they pursue in a more active manner some methodology to control the traffic signals. It's fine to reroute others that aren't immediately in the vicinity, but my concern is that those that are there need to get away much quicker than they're able to currently, and others that are not being rerouted from a distance, in other words, they're already proximate to it, that are continuing to head towards it. It doesn't appear that we're addressing that issue either. So I'm just wondering if, as a board, if we might not highlight that with a memo either to only the region or to all the stakeholders that were there, that we should be, in my opinion anyway, much more proactive in dealing with this issue. Thank you.
Chief, if you support what he said, it's better to go through you because you have the contacts with fire and that, if you can go with his ideas, or would you rather us just send a letter, a direction through Deb to send a memo to the region? What's your choice on this?
Through you, Mr. Chair, my understanding, Inspector Frayne was at that debrief. I'm not sure, quite frankly, what a letter would do. My understanding is more of a technology issue and the fact that the technology simply doesn't exist at this point to be able to control the lights electronically on a large scale such as this. But I'll reference Superintendent Frayne, who may have additional insight into that.
Okay.
Through you, Mr. Chair, just to let you know, next week we're meeting with the region and the emergency management team to begin discussing similar technology challenges right now to do reverse 911. I know there was some CRTC ruling to actually also allow the notification and the collection of data from cellular providers. So we're beginning that process and the discussion. We utilize some notification system for our own, and the region is looking to use the same tool. So we are actually addressing it as of next week.
And just to follow up specifically on the intersections, we did specifically talk about that with the region at the debrief, and I thought there must be some way that you can electronically control these as well, but they don't have that capability, and they don't have even the cameras set up there, so you'd know when's the appropriate time to do it, so they wouldn't be able to control it that way. But that's something in the future. I'm sure that's going to happen. In terms of the intersections themselves, you can control the traffic lights by getting down there and manually turning keys to override. The difficulty with that is actually getting people from the region down there to do that. The region was extremely busy at that point in time trying to get barricades down to us to set up at intersections, and they were facing the same difficulty. As they were coming down the roads, they were gridlocked. We ultimately ended up sending cruisers to escort them through the traffic with our lights going to get them through, but that became problematic. And we're also escorting TerraPure and the manufacturer to the scene because they couldn't even get down there on the highway, so we had to send our cruisers out to pick them up. So all of our resources were really, really stretched at that point in time. So that's where I think the solution that we best came up with is knowing that this is a hurdle, and in the future that will be resolvable, is to get our auxiliaries down there and get them to physically take over the intersections and then control it on a manned basis to push people through. That's the best we can do right now, but I know the region is definitely looking at how this can be better handled in the future. And this would be a problem that's not just specific to Niagara. This is a problem that's specific, across Canada, basically, with the lights, trying to deal with that.
Thank you. I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but I understand the current circumstances that we don't have the technology in place to do it. I'd just like to understand that we're going to actively pursue one, understanding what technology is required, and secondly, understanding what kind of timeline is going to be required to put it in place. We've had this incident. It could have been far worse, and I'm not a chicken little running around screaming that Armageddon could have happened, but nevertheless, given that we've had this incident, we've identified these issues, we understand we don't have the current technological capability, but I would suggest that it's it was within our mandate to ensure that those who are our partners are actively moving with us to put in place an understanding of what's required and also to get that equipment out there so that we can help ourselves and we're not relying on deployment of auxiliary officers, et cetera, that somebody is going to have the responsibility to manage the traffic and get it away from a future scene. Thank you.
So Superintendent Frayne, you know what Member Bonham's saying, so you're going to be at the next meeting. If there's any news to come back to us, could you please let us know on this?
Absolutely, yeah.
Thank you very much. Any other comments on any other consent items from anyone? Okay, all those in favor of this? Accepted. Chief McCulloch, it's up to you now on your comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I'd like to highlight a letter of appreciation that we received from the Ministry of the Attorney General's office regarding Detective Sergeant Matt Hodges. It really highlights the skill set and expertise of the officers that we have working here within the Niagara Regional Police Service. So on July 11th, 2017, the service received this letter from Assistant Crown Attorney Andrew Sabatini of the Guns and Gangs Directorate in regards specifically to Detective Sergeant Matt Hodges and his involvement with the investigation and prosecution of 4 accused that were charged with first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, as a result of the killing of John Raposo that occurred on June 18, 2012 at the Sicilian Cafe in Toronto. The plot to murder Mr. Raposo was captured in tens of thousands of anonymous text messages that had been extracted from numerous encrypted cellular phones that were seized during 3 police investigations carried out by police agencies in various parts of Canada. Detective Sergeant Hodges, working with the Crown, was responsible for solving the identity of the anonymous authors of the messages and determining how to best present the data analysis in court. To do so, he had to cross-reference the information in the messages with other details in the investigative files so that as to support the accused were in fact the authors of the messages. It was a daunting task which took months to complete due to the enormous size of the investigative file, which measured 350 gigabytes in total. Detective Sergeant Hodges' acute analytical skills, detailed knowledge of the file, and tireless commitment to the task proved to be indispensable for the completion of this task. More specifically, Detective Sergeant Hodges was assigned the role as the witness responsible for presenting this evidence in court. His examination in chief and his cross-examination took over 3 weeks to complete, and it proved crucial in securing the 4 first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder convictions which were rendered in this case. During this long and often grueling cross-examination, Detective Sergeant Hodges demonstrated integrity, poise, and grit. And without the commitment of the Niagara Regional Police Service to commit Detective Sergeant Hodges to this investigation, it's quite likely that it may have yielded a different result in court. The Crown was specifically grateful for the Niagara Regional Police Service for assigning Detective Sergeant Hodges to this investigation, and it really speaks to the collaboration between all police services and our justice partners in working collaboratively to solve crime in our communities.
If you don't mind, I'm going to interrupt you for a second. Is he here? No? In the future, if it works for you, if it works for him, he might be undercover. If he could come, we'd like to give him our compliments.
Thanks. His boss is here. Staff Sergeant Sean Clarkson is in the room. And we also plan on more formal recognition for Matt Hodges at one of our upcoming award ceremony. Thank you. With regards to 911 primary public safety answering point, as you're well aware, under the agreement with the Niagara Region, the Niagara Regional Police Service provides emergency 911 call answering service in the region. The agreement allows police to integrate emergency 911 call answering into our police communications center. The performance of the Police Communications Center and the 911 PSAP is monitored on an ongoing basis by an advisory committee, which is comprised of stakeholders from Niagara EMS, the region, and emergency service partners from the fire and ourselves. The NRPS recently prepared a report on the performance of the program for the advisory committee, and there are some key results that we think are noteworthy for the board to hear. An analysis of the 33,518 911 calls that were received at the Police Communications Center for the first quarter of 2017 demonstrates the following compliance levels. So the first measure is on receiving and processing emergency 911 calls, and the component one is that 90% of all 911 calls arriving at the PSAP are answered within 10 seconds. The analysis demonstrated during the first quarter that 27,508 calls were answered within 10 seconds, and that 1,704 calls were answered after 10 seconds, with the performance rating being 93.77% of calls being answered within the 10-second. The second component is that 95% of 911 calls should be answered within 20 seconds. And in that case, 28,818 calls were answered within 20 seconds, and 394 calls were answered after 20 seconds, with a performance rating being 98.4% of all calls answered within 20 seconds. Component 3 of that was that 90% of all calls would be transferred to the appropriate secondary police PSAP, which is either fire service or EMS, within 30 seconds. And 13,990 of the 14,649 transferred calls were offered to the secondary PSAP within 30 seconds of being answered by us. So that translates to a 95.5% success rate in achieving that standard. We're very pleased with these results, and I think the public can rest assured that should they need to call 911, the call will be swiftly answered and dealt with in an efficient and effective manner. I've already covered off the transport rollover. With regards to our marijuana grow operations, in June we had an estimated street value of $28,000 worth of marijuana that was seized, which brings our street value total for 2017 to $3,648,000. With regards to homicides that have occurred so far in 2017, we have 2 homicides that have occurred. Comparatively, we had 1 homicide in 2016, 6 homicides in 2015, and 3 homicides in 2014. So we'll hope the trend continues for 2017. With regards to collisions, or fatal collisions and life-threatening injury collisions, we had so far in 2017 we have 10 fatal collisions, and for the entire year of 2016 we had 20. So we're hoping that we can achieve that same trend for 2017. And as far as life-threatening injury collisions, for all of 2016 we had 24, and to this point in 2017 we've had 3 so far. So that's trending very favorably. As far as traffic fatality incidents that happened in June, there were 2 fatalities and 1 life-threatening motor vehicle collision that occurred in June. First one occurred on Sunday, June the 11th at 7:07 in the evening at Thorold Road, McLeod Road, and Thorold. We were dispatched to that location. An investigation revealed that a 54-year-old male resident of West Lincoln was riding his motorcycle northbound on Town Line Road, while at the same time an 18-year-old female resident of Niagara Falls was driving a 2007 Pontiac motor vehicle southbound on Thorold Town Line Road. Driver of the Pontiac made a left turn onto McLeod Road into the path of the motorcycle. 2 vehicles collided. Motorcycle rider suffered life-threatening injuries and was airlifted to an out-of-town hospital in critical condition. This male later died from his injuries the next morning. Driver of the Pontiac did not suffer any injuries. Collision remains under investigation by our Collision Reconstruction Unit. Charges are pending in this investigation. Second one relates to an incident that occurred in Smithville on Thursday, June 29th at approximately 11:25 p.m. We responded to Smithville Road near South Chippewa Road in the township of West Lincoln. Investigation revealed that a 68-year-old male resident of Brampton was the sole occupant of a Pontiac G6 motor vehicle that was traveling northbound on Smithville Road towards South Chippewa. Driver failed to negotiate the current curve, left the roadway, and struck a hydro pole on the east side of Smithville Road, caused the Pontiac to roll into the adjacent field. The male was located inside the vehicle, deceased. Police have since advised that the driver of their motor vehicle suffered a medical incident as a result of a coronary heart disease. This was confirmed by the postmortem, so therefore this collision, for the purposes of MTO, is not considered a fatality. There was another life-threatening collision that occurred on June 25th. We responded to a motor vehicle collision on Lakeshore Road at Stewart Road in the town of Niagara-on-the-Lake. Investigation revealed that a 20-year-old male resident of Welland was driving a Dodge eastbound on Lakeshore Road, making a left turn at an open gravel parking lot on Lakeshore Road, on the north side of Lakeshore Road, sorry. At that same time, a 20-year-old male resident of Niagara-on-the-Lake was riding a motorcycle eastbound on Lakeshore Road and was attempting to pass the Dodge Nitro. The motorcycle came into collision with the Nitro, causing the rider to be ejected. The rider of the Omaha motorcycle suffered life-threatening injuries, was transported to hospital out of region, and charges are pending and complete investigation by our reconstruction unit. We had an arrest made in our downtown in St. Catharines in regards to an assault that occurred on June 21st at 9:56 p.m. Ourselves and EMS attended a residence on Queenston Street in response to an assault. Upon arrival, a 32-year-old female had stab wounds to her upper body requiring immediate medical attention. Investigation led to another residence on Queenston Street where a female was located and arrested. A 33-year-old woman's been charged with aggravated assault. We had a robbery that occurred on Wednesday, June 28th at Daisy Mart at 36 Pelham Road in St. Catharines, where clerk was robbed at knife point. Suspect entered the store, brandished a knife while stealing an amount of cash from the cash register, and then fled on foot. Suspect was described as a white male, 25 to 30 years old, medium build, dark hair. Suspect was wearing a dark hooded sweatshirt. Suspect was lost his shoes and was barefoot, and that investigation is still ongoing. We had another incident on July the 6th. A 32-year-old man is facing numerous charges following an assault that occurred in the tourist area of Niagara Falls, where members of the Niagara Regional Police, two district officers attended regarding an incident at Ferry and Main Street in regards to a domestic disturbance. When officers arrived, it was determined a male was inside the house due to an unstable nature of the incident and the possibility of weapons being involved. Our tactical unit and our canine unit attended. A woman fled the residence prior to our arrival. The scene was held for about 5 hours, and our crisis negotiator unit was brought in. Members of the two district criminal investigation branch and our domestic violence unit were involved in the incident, and at 12:30 a.m. The man was arrested without further incident and is facing charges. Number of vehicle break-ins in Grimsby and Beamsville. Police are once again asking for the public's assistance in a rash of vehicle break-ins in this area. In all the incidents, some of the vehicle, some involving thefts of purses, laptops, cash, and GPS devices. The vehicles were unlocked and the valuables were in plain sight. So please ensure that your vehicles are locked and the valuables removed at all times when occupied. And if anybody has information on this, we're certainly willing to hear that. We had a violent residential robbery that occurred in St. Catharines on July the 12th at approximately 12 a.m. Members of the service responded in St. Catharines to a residence on Crestdale Avenue, called there for a violent residential robbery. The victims of the apartment reported to officers that approximately midnight a group of 4 to 5 males forced their way into the apartment. Both of the victims were assaulted prior to the suspects fleeing the residence. One of the suspects was armed with a knife. Canine attended but was unable to locate the suspect, and that remains under investigation by our detectives in St. Catharines. We had a number of bike thefts that occurred in Niagara Falls, and just want to remind members in the city of Niagara Falls that thefts are on the rise. Since Since April of 2017, over 90 bikes have been stolen from the Niagara Falls area alone. Hotel owners, campground operators, and merchants in the area are asked to remind out-of-town visitors who may have materials secured to their vehicles to store them in a secure location at their hotel. And we've been putting out similar warnings using social media to try and make people aware of this occurrence. We had an incident that occurred on July 17th at Sherkston Shores over the weekend, highlighting the dangers that our officers are subjected to on a daily basis. Incident happened in Port Colborne in the early hours of July 15th when 2 Niagara Regional Police officers were called to a patio bar at Sherkston over 2 males sleeping in the area. When officers attempted to wake the individuals, one suddenly turned violent, lunging at the officer and attempted to grab his gun to disarm the officer. Suspect then lunged at another officer before he was arrested, and that male has been charged with assault and disarming a police officer and assault with a weapon. We had an unfortunate drowning that occurred in the Welland River on Friday, July the 14th. We responded to the area, a campground on Stanley Avenue in the city of Niagara Falls in response to a report of an 18-year-old male who was swimming in the river and had began experiencing difficulty. Nearby civilians attempted to help the male but were unsuccessful. Emergency services responded and attempted to locate the male in the water, and our marine unit was called in to recover. And just want to highlight again the dangers of some of our waters and the undertows that exist there, so for members to be safe. And finally, just want to highlight the update that was requested by the board regarding background checks. There's currently a 3-week turnaround time for vulnerable sector employment background checks, and a turnaround time of 8 to 9 weeks for vulnerable sector volunteer background checks. So the first 3-week turnaround is for employment purposes, and the second turnaround time frame is regarding volunteers. The issues are directly related to the volume increases that we've experienced, and it was further compounded by the 256 checks that were required for the Special Olympics. Staffing has been increased twice over the past 2 years to try and curtail the incident. The unit has been actively trying to resolve the issue with additional overtime hours. I have our records manager, Gary Holden, here, and I know there may be some questions by the board, and Gary's, I can ask him to come forward to the mic and answer any questions you may have.
I know I have questions for Gary Holden, but does anyone else have any questions about the records checks first? Vaughn, you're up first.
Is he presenting something, or are we?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, board members.
I wasn't sure if you were presenting something first. I just have a question. In my time on the board, this has always been a bit of a bugaboo, the amount of time. And we'll often bring in people on overtime or whatever to try to get the list down, but we never get it down to 0. And sometimes I wonder if we could get a report or something, what it would take to get this waiting time down to negligible, not 2 weeks, but negligible, then, like for example, if it was through overtime or whatever it is, then maybe we could keep up. But it just seems like we're always behind. Now, I realize that it appears you give a priority to employment, but there are a number of people that are applying to take courses in university or whatever that need these checks in due time, or they get bumped out of the course that they've been accepted in. And to me, that's, you know, pretty much as serious as employment, because although it's not employment today, it's their career that we're dealing with. So I guess I would ask you if you have explanation, or is it possible to, maybe for the September meeting, get some kind of a report, what it would take to get this under control?
So I'll answer a couple of the first questions before I refer to the board or the report that I'm preparing for September. We are accommodating people when they contact us directly or through the chair. If they're coming to us and they're saying, okay, I need it by this date, this is the cutoff date for employment or co-op placement, we are accommodating those members. We don't want anybody to be missing out on an employment opportunity or a co-op placement through school just because of our backlog. So we are accommodating that volume of applicants. As far as the report in September, what we're doing is we're going to be doing a couple site visits with other police services. We realize we have to streamline our process. I don't think we'll ever get negligible because of the volume coming in online. They just sit in the queue until we get it, and then we can process it. We do identify that we will have a 2-week backlog for the employment, 30 days for the volunteer. That's pretty much online for the majority of the police services in the province. If somebody comes in for the entry-level police check, that's the criminal records check. We're doing that while they wait. We're going to be looking at doing that for the PIC, the middle check as well. It's a little more difficult to do that for the vulnerable sector check because we have to take fingerprints if they do a possible hit to the pardoned sex offender database. One of the things we're looking at to eliminate the volume is to interface. So we have an online process with Screen. People can go on our website, they can do it online without having to drive into the police service to drop it off or subsequently pick it up. We're looking to get an interface so that as soon as they go through the online process, it'll do the CPIC checks in the background. So by the time I assign somebody in the morning to go to the queue and process those checks, all of those CPIC database searches will be done. 2 other police services in the province, they have created their own online process, and they were able to manage an interface between their search application and CPIC. So that's what we're in the process of doing right now, so that we can talk to Screen, see if they can help us out, and that's going to streamline the process. I can also advise that we are going out into the community. We started a project with the Niagara College, and we actually go on site. We did it back in May, early June, where we had made an arrangements with the dean to process 300 students. So the students didn't have to come into our stations or any of our districts. We met them at the college. We processed it, and then we were able to say we can get these done in this time frame, and then we'll drop them off again. If that project is successful, we're going to do that with Brock University and a couple other community services as well. That can help. But we have to understand that some students didn't make it. Even though we expected 300, I think it was around 250 that maybe showed up. And the 50 students that didn't make it, they took another month and a half to get it into us. And of course, those ones weren't able to be processed within the same time frame. We do work with the community agencies. We talk to a lot of the deans at the schools for co-op placements. They're aware what our backlog is. We update our website at the beginning of every week to keep people updated as well. That way they know, saying, okay, if you're going to be doing a co-op placement, and if there's a 9 or 10 or 12-week backlog, whatever we are, that they're giving the students enough time to get those into us. That being said, we are trying to streamline the process so that we don't have to look at a 9-week backlog anymore, keeping it within the 30 days. But I can indicate that I looked at our stats yesterday, and we were up over 1,700 in the month of May and June. And of course, that causes a backlog in July trying to get those done. As well, the chief was indicating the 257 that we had to do for Special Olympics. And then we had an upgrade to our RMS system as well. Getting that application in and then figuring out how we're going to do the queries, it just caused a little bit of a backlog. That being said, and then with the summer holidays, all of these combined just causes just more to the volume. Not to make excuses, we appreciate that people need these if it's for employment or co-op placement, but we are doing what we can. I know I was here a couple months ago and I said the same song. I can advise back in May, April and May, we didn't have a backlog. We were able to meet those timelines of 2
Gary,
weeks and
just to
30
interrupt
days.
you, I don't need your whole report now because you're going to be saying the same thing to us in a month and a half.
In
So-
September?
In September. You're back
All
in
right.
September for a report. So
All right. Did I answer your question specifically?
Well, yes and no. I just want to know that in the September report that we get, I guess as a board member, I would like to be able to have a decision to say that the service comes to us and say to get rid of this backlog to whatever level is appropriate, that here's what I need. And I think then the board can decide whether or not we wish to put the resources into that or whatever. But to come back and say we're working on it, and I've been hearing this for a long time. I know you haven't been here for the whole time, but I've been on the board almost 8 years now. It's been the same thing on, and then, you know, as soon as something like a Special Olympics or whatever hits, that just throws us because we're already at the edge of replying to this. And I think maybe the real question is, in your report, would you be able to tell us in the report, here's what I need to catch up. I need 2 more people. I need software. I need whatever the plan is to say, how can we get this not only caught up, but maintained at that type of level? That's what I'd like to see in the report, and I'm just wondering if will be part of what the report you'll present to us is.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping is going to be in the report. Again, I'm going to be doing site visits with other police services, work with their online provider to see what they can do to help us streamline the process. So yeah, that's the goal.
Terry.
Thank you, Chair, and appreciate your presentation. I keep coming back to this point, though, with regard to reference checks, and that is that if those requiring it do not give us enough lead time, that immediately creates a crisis for us and lends itself to Member Stewart's concern about the backlog. In other words, if I'm running a summer day camp for children under 12 and I don't let people know they've been accepted to manage that until the end of June, obviously there's a crisis automatically. So I'm wondering what we're doing to get out ahead of this and to advise those that they feel need to have their employees checked for background. What are we doing to get the message to them that we need more lead time or minimum lead time, whether it be educators, employers, public service people in general? That, to me, would go a long way towards alleviating the concern. Get ahead of it, give us reasoned lead time, because if at the end of the day, if you don't have it and I phone late, then obviously that becomes a statistic for us, and that we didn't provide service within X number of days, and yet we had no opportunity to reasonably manage it, and we may be looking at putting more resources into something where really what we should be doing is telling the people asking for the service that if you don't give us lead time, you can expect that you will not have your approvals in some good time. Thank you.
So we do have a lot of information on our website. We had a meeting yesterday. We're asking our communications provider to put out tweets and social media as well. It's really hard for us to hit all the agencies out there. We don't know who's going to have a sudden need to do background checks, but we are trying to put out tweet messages where we have annual meetings with a lot of the agencies. Other than that, it's really hard to identify all the agencies who do need or need to require a background check. But we are trying to put out as much communication as possible.
Okay, any other questions for Gary? Okay, I have a few here, Gary. And I know you're coming back with the report, so this is what I'm asking you for. I need a comparison with more than just a couple of services. You'll be able to play this back on the tape or whatever, or you can write down. So I want the Big 12, or use Deb if you want, but I need to know that we are in line, because I've heard from too many people, and they're just citizens, but in Toronto you can get in the same day. Now I understand vulnerable sector ones. If you're from Toronto and you live in Edmonton, or you're born in Edmonton, it takes a little bit longer. But I'm having too many people, as you know how many times I bother you with people calling, and that can't compare them. We have a new team here, and I'm asking for innovative on everyone. I brought it up a couple of years ago, that why can't we, and Chief McCulloch said to me, it's not, I believe it was you, or maybe it was Deputy Chief Flynn that said that this is not a wash on the money we charge. So if we have to charge more to make it a wash, then we should. If we have a special line for somebody that forgets, if Al's son needs one right now, he might have to pay more for it, but I don't want him to lose that job because he can't. And I brought this up a couple years ago, and they said that wouldn't be fair because then that person's put in front of the line. So maybe we have to be innovative and have one person that comes in once a week that is getting all the $100 checks when everybody else gets 40. But I need somebody to be innovative here so a person does not lose a job because they slipped up. And I understand mistakes happen, but we were elected and everybody's talking about jobs, and I don't want to hear somebody lost a job because, hell, you made the mistake. You're going to pay twice as much for it, but at least you keep the job. And you know how many calls I get from people saying I don't get a job. Deb had one last night that it's been, I believe, 2 months, and the person, if he doesn't have it by a certain time this week, he loses, or he can't go to Western. That's right, he can't go to Western. He loses his course. Well, maybe you have to pay more because he took long, but this man's been 2 months. If the story's correct, and I'm not trying to bury you on this, but if you can come up with innovative ways with the blessing of the chief and the 2 deputies and everyone else, I'd appreciate that. Then social media or whatever it has to be to let the citizens know, the schools, the Niagara colleges, the Brocs, the charities especially, who demand records checks for everybody. And you know how it is. They just flip off and say, I need a records check. And everybody says that, Pan Am games and that, and it inundates you with so many coming in that these people have to be aware for their students, and most of them are, but they have to shake the kids, and we know what some kids are like. We know what life's like, that some listen, some don't. But if we have social media or something to go to these students and say, you will not go to university next year if you don't get this. And even though this has happened, some people still don't do it, and I know we've had a couple that you've even commented on. These people have been warned. So maybe the people have to get it out there, and the parents have to start thinking about this on behalf of their kids. I don't know who to blame for this, but if you can show me when you come back with the report how you've notified all these people, I'd appreciate it, and maybe you have done all that. And that might be it on that. So whatever you can come back with this, and you're doing a great job. Everybody's doing a great job. We have the best records checks around. I know that with Uber and that, so I commend you for that. But, you know, whatever you can think outside of the box, I'd appreciate it. Any other questions for Gary? Thank you, sir. Any questions for the chief on his comments? I'm sorry? Oh, go ahead, chief.
Sorry, I just had Deputy Chief 40 wanted to just top up on the first incident or first announcement that I made regarding Detective Sergeant Matt Hodges.
By all means.
Thank you, Chief, and through the chair. When I listened to the chief reference the good work conducted by Detective Sergeant Matt Hodges, it caused me to reflect for a second, and I thought I would add some narrative to the significant role that the Niagara Police played with respect to the arrest and prosecution of Dean Wowichar and Robbie Al-Khalil. 2 of the individuals that were arrested and charged and convicted for the murder of Raposo in Toronto were part of a criminal organization that were committing murders across the country, frankly, in Vancouver and Surrey, out in British Columbia. And their arrest, subsequent prosecution and conviction had a meaningful impact on law enforcement across the country, saved significant dollars for agencies, but I guess more importantly, prevented thoughtless, senseless murders from taking place in public places that resulted in innocent people being hurt. So it may appear on the surface as if this is an isolated arrest and an isolated prosecution, but in point of fact, the footprint of this was significant and national in scope. The persons involved in this were organized crime agencies that are recognized by our courts as organized crime agencies with tentacles across the country. So I really wanted to take an opportunity to underscore the significant role that the Niagara Police played in saving lives across the country. That's all.
So thank you for that, Deputy Chief 40. So I defer to you and the chief and the other deputy chief that, like, how do we promote this? because that's great police work, and that's what we're all about. And you have to come up with this. I know we give an award, and I'm sure this person will be getting an award next year, next year when it comes up. But this is better than that. So I hope the press, have we sent out a press release on this, or do you do that? And if not, why not?
We have not at this point in time. This is a Toronto investigation, but we can coordinate with Toronto and see if whether or not we can put a media release together on this. Typically, we don't put a media release out on when convictions are registered. We tend to put the media release out when the individuals are arrested. But again, we'll have our media people coordinate with Toronto on that.
I'll defer to you on this, but it's such a good, like when I listened to it from my days of being a cop in the 70s, that's great police work, and you can recognize that, especially with what you did out west. But you know, whatever we can do to boost that, because that's what we're all about, and it shows how professional we are. So thank you for that. Any other questions for the chief on his comments? Okay, I have one, or I think I have a couple here, and I'm sorry to take your time on this. On behalf of the public who we represent, you talked about the 911, and I'm proud of the 98%. But what measures do you have in place for the 300 and some odd calls that were over 20 seconds? I know we want to be perfect, and we can't always be, and this isn't to be critical, but there must be measures in place that you say, why were they over 20 seconds? Was it a Friday night at 5 o'clock and everybody called all at once? I just want to know that there are measures in place.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm going to refer to Superintendent Frayne, who oversees our communications unit, to clarify that question.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. When we do those stats, we've sort of given you the high-level stats. The other ones are tracked, and we look at each one to see exactly what happened and why there was a delay. And you're very correct in saying sometimes it's the call volume. So a good example would be when we had that collision out on the highway with the truck, when we're getting all of those calls coming in, some of those calls are going to be held. And we know exactly how long we're keeping callers on the line on each individual call. We track all of that. So each call is looked at, and those aren't forgotten. Those aren't missed.
Okay, so my point of bringing it up was if anybody's watching and says, well, they had 300 that went over 20, like, are they doing something about it? And we are. So that's great. The other thing was the bike thefts, and I read about that. Maybe it was in the paper, or maybe you sent it out. There's so many bike thefts. What are we doing extra? Are we doing anything extra about that? I know you've announced that you should write down the VIN numbers or whatever they are on bike, serial numbers on bikes and that. Is there more that we're doing for this? And is there a certain city? Is it Niagara Falls because it's tourism, or is it downtown St. Catharines, or?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the incidents primarily are taking place in Niagara Falls, and I know Inspector McCaffrey, who oversees Niagara Falls, the detective offices are investigating those incidents, and they're reaching out with the hotel owners and trying to get word out again to try and educate and inform the people to prevent them from being further victimized. But I'll ask Inspector McCaffrey if he can top up on that answer.
Through you, Mr. Chair. I can report that we currently have arrested 5 individuals. We've recovered at least 30 bicycles. There are a number of officers who are specifically assigned to this and continue to address it as best they can. I anticipate further arrests in the next few weeks. It is being top priority.
That's what I want to hear. Perfect. Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you, Chief. So next on the list is the NRPS capital budget. We're going to move, or I guess it just falls right into the agenda now. So item number 182, the 2018 NRPS capital budget and 9-year capital forecast. Can I have a mover and seconder to put it on the floor, please? Member Bonham, Member Stewart. Chief, is there a presentation on this, or are we just asking questions on it?
There is a short presentation that I'll go over, and we have, like I said earlier, we have all the subject matter experts that are here that were involved in formulating the capital budget. So if you have any specific questions, I'll first refer to the superintendents that oversee that area, and if you need more specific detail, we can go down right to the subject matter expert if you need it. Okay, and one thing I'm going to say to you for the future, and this is, it sounds critical no matter how I word it, but we can always wait for an answer if we ever have to, if any of these gentlemen and ladies that are here that are necessary out on the road. So I'm never going to force you for an answer right then and there if somebody's not here
down the way and that. So we don't need all your staff here, but it's your choice always. Thank you.
Very good, thanks. I just want to first highlight the capital budget calendar. Just go to the next slide. All this technology. That's fine for me, yeah. So I'll start, because you have them in your packages already, I believe. The budget calendar was approved by our Police Services Board on May 25th, 2017, and the deadline for our capital request submissions was June 9th, 2017. Our executive capital budget review was June 28th, 2017, and today is the day that we present to our Police Services Board. The budget is to be delivered to the Regional Corporate Services for August the 18th, 2017, and then there's a consolidated budget to the region, to their Budget Review Committee on October the 5th, 2017. So under the provisions of the Police Services Act, the Police Services Board is responsible for submitting capital and operating budgets to the Regional Council in the format and within the timetable established by Council. As the Police Services Board meeting on the 25th, the Board approved the timelines, and as per the schedule, we're reporting to you today. So just to provide a little bit of an overview for our capital budget, the total proposed capital budget is $4,692,000. Represents a decrease of about $2 million from the amount that was forecasted for 2018 in last year's 9-year forecast. It's a combination of debt being financed through our capital reserves and the issuance of debt. Summary of the project that are going to be presented. First off is our vehicle replacement, which is $1,400,000, and I'm going to turn to Director DiDonato to provide some further details on that.
So the service is proposing to design and implement, oh, sorry, wrong one. Oh my goodness. This is the annual cost associated with the vehicle usage. The severe environment that emergency service vehicles operate under require a consistent replacement and structured life cycle to prevent failure and address safety and reliability concerns. Fleet has reduced the budget substantially over the past 9 years, from $1.7 million to $1.4 million in 2017, and we're asking for the same amount in 2018. The vehicles are purchased with the assistance of the Police Purchasing Cooperative Group tender.
So do you want me to, Chair, I'm at your beck and call, just go through the entire presentation? Very good.
Yeah, or are you going to hit every one, or do you want us just to pick the ones that we're, in a matter of time? Like there's some here we agree with totally.
Okay, so why don't I highlight all of the ones that we've asked for, and okay, rather than go to the superintendents right off, if you have questions, then we can have them drill down further for you.
Perfect,
okay, so,
thank you.
We have we've itemized the IT and network equipment replacement at $1,100,000. We're asking for LiDAR units for our district operations. They're the enhanced, if you will, radar speed measurement devices that we use for to assist in our traffic management.
Would you like questions as we go along on these individual items, or do you want to wait until you're done? It's your call.
Why don't I list them, and then I'm at your beck and call, quite frankly.
No, go ahead. You do the whole thing.
So that's $14,000 we're asking there. We're requesting upgrades to our 5 and 8 district evidence management system, and that's a request of $80,000. And again, that's a retrofit to so that we have a much better accounting of our evidence that comes into our possession. We have TASER or CEW replacements for $24,000. Our mobile data terminal replacements for $800,000. We have a request for a tactical explosives disposal robot at $175,000. There's a human resource scheduling solution software that we're asking for at $500,000, which we feel will streamline our efficiencies and allow us to be much more efficient in terms of our scheduling of officers. We have collision mapping software at $28,000. We have requested equipment to assist us. I mentioned this earlier. We have a grant application that has gone in, and we're not sure of the result of that, but we're asking for powdered narcotics and handling equipment to deal with the opioids that are coming into our possession for $73,000. We have an air monitor for $9,500, flashback video recorders at $20,500, and a bomb suit to assist with our explosive disposal unit for $40,000, which is the unit is no longer under warranty, and we want to make sure that we have that replaced. We have a communications noise reduction that is required in our communications unit so that it's more effective, and that's $53,000. And we have an information management governance project, which is at $375,000. That's it.
Member Castle.
Thank you, and thank you for your hard work in bringing this in at a level that's consistent with last year's without any increase. I appreciate that. Just a couple of questions, if I may, with respect to just trying to think outside the box here. Sure. That's all. With respect to the HRIS scheduling solution, the software related to that, is there any possible way of gaining efficiencies by combining that initiative with the region, perhaps using their software, or joint venturing on something?
So the scheduling solution that we're looking for is another component of the software that is being utilized by the region. So we are partnering in that respect. Our needs specific to scheduling court and some of the other components of emergency services, we have, through inquiries with our staff, have learned that it may not, the scheduling components that the region uses are not, will not work for what we want. But I'll have Lisa to speak a little further with regards to that.
So Cheryl Pathy's here as well, but the scheduling software used by the region, it's used by limited number. It's not the software that comes within the basic Chronos. It's another software that's used by limited number of departments within the region. We looked at that when it first became available at the region, and it did not meet any of our, it didn't meet the needs we had. We looked at it again. We put together a group from HR and operations a couple months ago, and we looked at it again. We had them CalLogic actually come in. We looked at it again. It did not meet what we're looking for to get the efficiencies. It doesn't allow for the scheduling of annual leave the way we need it, and there's some other components. We have the one we're looking at, not the one we've chosen because we have to send out RFP, but the one we're looking at is being used by Peel York or Peel, I can't think of it right now. I think it's Peel right now, and it added a number of efficiencies there. It's designed for emergency services. We actually think EMS might gain some, be able to use it because they don't use the one at the region right now. So we were looking at that one that's specifically designed for emergency services. The one at the region will not provide us the efficiencies. We have looked at it twice already.
Thank you. Just trying to think outside the box any way possible.
May I just, sure. Anybody else have any questions on that item? I'll come back to you, Al. Okay. Go ahead, Terry, on that item.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I don't have any questions on it. I just have a comment possibly to reinforce the need. When we went through preparations for negotiations, as well as when we review our annual summaries of overtime worked, a lot of the issues, one, we couldn't get timely responses to questions on because the information cannot be accumulated effectively. It's what we've got can summarize past experience, but it can't provide information, as I understand, Lisa, and you may want to correct me, it can't provide information going forward based on, say, vacations booked this year. Until they actually happen, we have no way of having a look at what the profile is. So it's sort of in bad need of an upgrade, and has some very potential good upside in terms of cost reductions, in terms of overtime management going forward. So I just want to lend my wholehearted support to the initiative. Thank you.
On that item, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. And it is on the same item. In looking at, I think it's Appendix 2H it's called, where it outlines the appropriate budget expenditures. The software at $165,000. The implementation cost is $250,000, and your note below that says implementation costs have been estimated to include external consulting. The software is obviously something you're buying from a, I don't see the actual supplier name here. Is that a realistic, that seems like a high amount of money. Is there a realistic value in that? What I'm getting at is that we're spending $250,000 to implement a piece of software worth $165,000. You also reference in here that part of that is to, I guess, offset internal staffing costs?
So just like any other, when Kronos, PeopleSoft, whenever there's upgrades at the region or whatever, there's implementation, just like EFMS, you get external partners to come in and help you do the implementation. So we have actually costed it out with external partners to get some ideas of how much it would cost, because we don't want to just do it ourselves. You need, for some, this is a huge, huge implementation. It would take a number of months to do. It's a we want to get it right. We want to configure it right. And so you would need an implementation partner. Included in there also is the hope that we can second a couple of members to the project, an operational member and an HR representative to the project to ensure we get it right the first time. If we get this right the first time, we could see some operational savings. We've talked to other police services who have implemented, and you really need to get it right the first time. And it is normal to use an implementation partner for something this big.
So then I'm correct, then some of our costs are going to assist in those two staff members to get them on board as well during that time period. So their involvement then would not end up being on our overtime books.
Exactly. And also, so a lot of times when we do these types of projects, we end up, you know, other things get put to the side while the project's getting done. In this case, we'd like to actually second it, and they don't have the time to dedicate specifically to the project. And this time, we would like to actually put the staff on, dedicate the project to ensure that it's done right from the beginning, so we don't have to reconfigure it later, and that it's a smooth transition, because there's going to be a lot of training for our frontline officers on this, and there'll be a lot of training involved at the. There will be a lot of operational pieces in this. This is not an HR project, even though it's called HRIS. This is operational. It's an operational project, because they're the ones who are going to benefit the most from this.
And again, I see in part of that document, there's a reference of actually a payback from this in years 19, 20, and 21, et cetera. Okay, thank you.
Member Stewart.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. I'm just curious on this one. I heard you mention that, you know, this software is needed because it's very specific to emergency services, and that somebody like EMS may be interested in this. And I'm just kind of curious as to whether there would be any cost-sharing opportunity with EMS for the software, because it would be housed in the regional computers. Is that right? Or, in other words, is there opportunity for some cost-sharing model with the software?
So I would say we would do the capital project to start. We would do the capital project to start here, because we don't know where it'll be housed. It'll interface with the regional software, but I'm not sure exactly where it will be housed, here or there. We haven't even come to that decision. This is just high EMS on, and if we did, they would probably be able to share a portion of the licenses and the license fee at that point. But I think that we're budgeting it in our budget for capital. We wouldn't ask them to budget a piece in their capital, but future licenses they could pay their share of if they were interested in coming on.
Thank you, Chair. And just through you, a comment. I mean, I like to see that. I mean, I realize that, you know, the whole thing about one taxpayer and whatever it is, but, and we did that same thing with the radio system, that other people aren't going to pay the capital twice. But I think as a police service, we'd like to make sure people know that if we've got some capital money and other jurisdictions are benefiting from it in some way, shape, or form, I think that's showing efficiencies in a global perspective that I'd like to see.
So I'll be the last one on this item, then we'll be back to Member Castellan again. And I'm going to try and word this nicely, but I trust you a lot. I trust this whole team a lot. And I look at $500,000 and I look at, that's 5 cops on the road. And I know that we are really looking at cops on the road. We need more. But I have to defer to you on this item because Ken understands computers and Terry understands it and they say it'll be better, and so does Lisa. But, you know, I look at the money. I know one's operations, one's capital. But as long as you're looking under your staff, because you guys are our future, to do the questions that we're asking you, and we're just all repetitive in that, then I have to trust the way this is going on this. But you have a meeting with CAO Carmen D'Angelo at the region. If you can bring up all these things, please do. And hopefully he brings out things that they might be able to use us on, and we save some costs somewhere. Thank you. Al, back to you.
Thank you. So my next question is actually, I think the two may be related, the tactical explosives disposal robot and also the bomb suit. Are they two items together?
They are through you, Mr. Chair, they are two separate items and not often or sorry, not always dependent upon each other. More specific, where somebody dressed in the suit would come in close contact with an explosive device, and another where we could remotely use the robot to affect the same procedures.
Fair enough. Being that they're a similar type of situation, I'm wondering how often do we have need to use that one or both of those items in a year, let's say?
I'm going to defer to Superintendent Brian Ash, who can provide some further clarity on that.
Thank you, sir. I think probably best that I defer to our subject matter expert. Sergeant Damien McMiniman is here from the explosives unit, and he'd be best to answer those questions and the particulars of each of those items.
Welcome.
I'm on. Chair Board. In a normal year, we run anywhere 24 to 36 calls. They're all different. As far as putting on a suit, every one of those calls, there's potential to put it on. On a normal year, we're probably half a dozen times where somebody is putting on the suit to make an approach on something. As far as the robot has, and I say those are our explosive calls of some sort, running up to about 36. But we also support the TAC unit. So we'll also implement the robot on the explosive calls as well as in support of tactical. So they're used on a regular basis.
Thank you for that. And I read in the material that it has got some age to it. But what makes this year the year that it's needed and perhaps not next year?
Well, for the suit itself, there's probably a bit of an oversight. The manufacturer, we were all under the impression it was 10 years, not only myself, but other units. And it came up last year that it was 7 years. And we're in the 8th year with the suit as it is. The robot, this here is the rotation. It's the last time we replaced this robot was back 2004, 2005. So it's hitting a life cycle. It's also now starting to cost us a lot of money as opposed to just normal maintenance. it's starting to break down. I can go to the point that we used to have two options with it. We could use it with radio frequency or with an attached line. We had to make a choice based on the software. Where everything before was this robot is analog, nowadays everything's gone digital. The support isn't there anymore for the maintenance of the robot.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions on the bomb items? I have one. The purchasing agent for these type of things, you know more than anybody, or maybe the superintendents know it. Who purchases this? Who checks to make sure that we're getting the right thing? Is it you?
Yes, sir.
Good. Okay, so you're aware of what's the best, where we save money, what's better for our officers, and all that. You take in all facts considered.
Oh, yes, sir. Absolutely.
You're the man. That's what I wanted to hear. Thank you.
That's all my questions. Thank you.
I know Ken has questions. Terry, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm wondering on the mobile data terminals, given that they're in for about 800,000, wondering if there's any opportunity to split them up over 2 years. I understand that they're going to identified cars or marked cars versus undercover cars, so to speak. I'm just wondering if we couldn't hive them off on that basis and spread the cost over 2 years. Thanks.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm going to refer to Director of School for this question.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, it is a possibility, and we will look into that. In some cases, we have done a really good job in negotiating a best price when we actually negotiated with the vendor of record for the bulk purchase. And I'll give an example. When I went back to the board back in 2000 probably about 6 years ago, when I sought authorization to replace the MDT equipment, we actually beat the public sector price that was negotiated by $200 a unit. So there's an opportunity, and we would like to actually leverage the savings. One of the challenges that we're trying to address, which has been brought up through fleet and from our front line, is the actual cabin space, and we're trying to mitigate a really tight cabin right now, and then also increase some mobility in the car. So we can take a look at it if we can spread it out, and if we can actually achieve a lot of efficiencies by buying a bulk. We want to also take advantage of the warranty and not having to sit there for a year, so we can just spread the spending, if that helps.
Just further on that issue, I think we could possibly commit in bulk with a commitment that over 2 years we're going to buy the number we need, with perhaps an opportunity to purchase some in 2017 or 2018 and others in 2019, which should lend itself to us having the buying power of more units while spreading the numbers out. So I just ask if you could look at it from that perspective and give us some help with the 2018 budget in that manner. Thank you.
I will look through, Mr. Chair. I will look through that, and we'll need the advice and the consultation from the purchasing and our QM to see if we can do that. But we'll report back if we could do that.
Anybody else have any questions on that item? Terry, anything else?
Yes, thank you, Chair. On the air monitor, I'm just wondering, do we have one or is it multiples? Is it a personal monitor like body worn? What does it monitor? Is it CO, oxygen, explosives? Is there something that I could hear that would lend itself to the needs and that sort of stuff? Thank you.
I'm going to refer to Acting Superintendent Jim Prinzen to respond to this.
Good morning. I actually have brought Detective Rick Wiesner here. He's in the audience, and he's the one who actually uses his equipment, so I'll have him respond to your question.
The air monitor is it's like a personal item that we carry on our vest. In our Guns, Gangs, and Grows unit, we currently have just one. It's because we go in as a team into grow ops. So It would monitor oxygen, carbon dioxide, hydrogen sulfide for natural gas leaks. The current one we have, I believe, is from 2007, 2006. It's dated. It's unpredictable at times for powering on. We've had it repaired, but it's just the components for it to fix it or become obsolete.
So, okay, believe me, I've had a lot of experience with these things, unfortunately. So you don't draw a sample from the environment before anybody enters. It's on somebody who goes in and then monitors their experience. Is that the way it's used?
Correct. As we enter, when we execute a search warrant on a residence or a rural property that houses a grow-op or an extraction lab, the monitor, because we are usually responding prior to the fire department who carry them as well, we're usually first entering. So that monitors the air. If there's an alarm, then we back out and wait till the fire department attends.
Do you have gases that allow you to proof the sensors? In other words, most people who rely on this for health and safety would have sample gases of a given concentration and would need to be having the unit sniff it and verify capability before it was put into use on an individual. Do we have that going on here, or do we have another agency that does that? Further to that, the cells have a useful life. And I'm just wondering, is that consistent with your request now that the cells have sort of timed out? Or where are we with that as well? Thank you.
Yes, we do have the docking station and gas that does a bump test on a nightly basis to ensure that it's working. It has been repaired. It is in working order, but it, at times, sometimes the battery doesn't want to charge. So sometimes it does turn on when we get there. There's been situations where I've had to call the fire department to go in with us on entry just to ensure safety.
Thank you very much. Do you change cells, or do you, like based upon the type of entry, would you have the unit sniff for different things on different occasions, or is it just a stock unit that you would specify and it's sampling the same thing for each and every entry?
That's correct. It's doing the same tests every entry, carbon dioxide, oxygen levels, and that hydrogen sulfide checks.
Does it monitor for explosives?
Lower and upper level explosive checks.
Thank you.
Any other questions here about the air monitor? I have one. Are you directly involved with this to make sure we're getting the most efficient for our officers?
Yes, I am, and I have talked with Sergeant McMenamum. Their office may be in need of one as well, so we may be able to couple our requests and maybe get a little bit better deal from the supplier.
Thank you very much. Terry, anything else? Over to you, Ken.
Thank you. And through you to the chief and the appropriate person. Couple of questions, obviously dealing more in the technology reports that are in front of us. This is the 2B document. It is for an allocation of $1,100,000. In the past, we have seen, or I have seen at this board, basically a $700,000 a year capital line item for what I would consider to be probably IT replacement of equipment. And this one here, because it talks about replacement, takes us up another, up to $1,100,000. In the detail on page 1, you reference the $700,000, you talk about the network equipment of $100,000, and then there's the digital evidence management system. Can you give me some, I know you have it, laid out here. More on page 3 it talks about it. Is this has nothing to do with implementation down the road of body cameras, correct? It has nothing to do with that.
Through you, Mr. Chair, if we go down the road of body-worn cameras, absolutely, the digital management software will be, will play a big role in that. But we have video sources coming in from a variety of sources, whether it's on-site here within our security or prisoner management area as well. And the software is used or required to manage all of the different digital assets that we have.
Okay, what I was getting at, so we would have use for it, not just for this, in any future endeavors. And I can appreciate we are probably getting a lot more store video of robberies, thefts, all sorts of stuff, even from residential components.
The recent stat I heard was that there are about 7 different digital devices associated with an investigation now. So it's becoming more and more prevalent all the time.
And the last one on this point then is, I think, a discussion we had in relation to the tractor-trailer incident on the QEW, and the chief was out of town. The Motorola Wave push-to-talk. I did some research online on that after that conversation. Motorola is, I guess, has developed an iOS and Android app. Is this $115,000 to buy the app, or does it buy basically the back room component of that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it does include the box or the server that is going to sit in the back room or the radio room, and then it's a licensing per device. So, you know, so it's a combination of both. It's most likely the licenses per device that is going to have that feature on it.
You know, in my research on the Motorola side, it looked to me like it was a Dell box, probably running Linux for a retail value of about $1,800, and I'm high on that. So what they're making their money on here is licensing cost. Do you have to license each individual who uses the push-to-talk app?
That is correct. Through you, Mr. Chair, it is correct. It's going to be per Android or iOS device to be able to talk back to through to our P25 system.
How many users are you anticipating to put onto the system using this app?
Right now, we're envisioning to start with 100, and we're not anticipating it may grow than 100, but for now, we wanted to start with 100 and then assess from there. Okay.
Not in public session, but I'd like to hear your implementation strategy, where you got the 100. I thought this was going to be designed basically for senior command staff.
As through you, Mr. Chair, yes, I mean we're also looking at it from a redundancy business continuity perspective. So if we had an outage potentially, for whatever reason, in one of the radio sites, and it may impacted portable coverage on the radio, this will allow us that redundancy, because as you are aware, when we have decommissioned the old radio system, and we have used it on a couple of occasions to allow us some migration. This one here is allowing us that redundancy, but it is the intention also to deal with other requirements, such as special events, than having to purchase additional radios. So we can have further discussions at the next meeting, but I believe we had some discussion on that through the IT committee meeting.
Okay, that would be appreciated. Thank you. I have other reports or other sections, but I'll turn
any other questions on the IT item? Go ahead.
This is on HI, collision mapping, IMS map 360 and PIX4D. If I remember at a conference, not this year, last year, the OPP demonstrated this. They were using a UAV or drone type device to basically do collision mapping of traffic scenes. The intent was basically to try to clear incidents on QEW 401 series highways in under an hour. The application of the devices you're buying here, I see a software amount of 20 grand. I see a price for the $8,000 for other. and I know we have two UAV devices. One we got as part of the Pan Am Games, one we had purchased, I think, a couple of months earlier. Are those devices capable of providing the accuracy of the imaging that feeds into the software, or do we have to buy a specific UAV to deal with mapping?
Through you, Mr. Chair, our current UAVs that we have would be utilized for that function.
Oh. And I'm assuming you've done a pilot or tested at least once? I mean, it all works?
Sir, through you, Chair, no, we haven't been able to test it because we don't have the equipment, but we know from the other services, including the OPP, that the current UAV we have will support this software.
Okay, thank you. And do I assume then the one that we obtained through the Pan Am Games is more suitable than the DJI device that we got a couple of months earlier?
No, as it turns out, the DJI UAV has the capability where the other it does not.
Okay, thank you. And I have other stuff, but it may be
anything else in collision mapping? Go ahead.
Where am I? HL, flashback video recorders for 20 grand. These are personal worn devices, semi-covert.
Yeah, I can answer that. Those are covert cameras that are used by our intelligence unit, and they're deployed in sensitive investigations. They're not personally worn.
Okay, thank you. I know where you're going.
Anybody on that one? By the way, Chief, I see that some people are leaving, and that's fine with us. If we've hit your item, you're free to go, as long as the Chief okays it. I can't say that, but your back's to them. So.
It's okay with me, thank you.
There he goes. Thank you.
Okay, the next one is 2O is an Oscar. Information Management Governance Joint Project with Corporate Records, Digitalization, Electronic Forms, which is always something I've been talking about. There's reference here to open text and SharePoint upgrades. A lot again in the consulting area. Comment on the construction, curious on that. So if somebody could give me a little bit of background on the consulting. Is this similar to what we heard before, a specific firm that has expertise in this area?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that is correct. So on the consulting piece, as we perform major upgrades of the enterprise content management, which is open text, we would require some vendor or partner assistance to actually do it right. I really just want to echo what Lisa was saying earlier, is this is an enterprise solution that we need to get it done right because it does involve a lot of process changes, and it does require a little bit of realignment in how we deal with the records. I do have Gary Holden here as well, because this is a joint project with records. It does require a lot of changes, what we do or how we handle paper and transition that paper into the digital world. But so this consulting is based on estimates. We had a couple of years ago when we did perform a large open text upgrade, we did require the expertise of open text or their partner to perform the upgrade. And that upgrade actually resulted in 100% successful migration from an older version to a newer version. I'm not sure, Gary, if you have additional comments, but that is related to the consulting. And the construction, it's just really on the in the actual redesigns and rechanges in the actual architecture to allow a lot of the integration we're talking about between the open text tools and actually with our SharePoint infrastructure. So that's where the construction pieces do come in, because there's a lot of integration with multiple technologies.
So construction here is not in the physical
No,
sense.
no, this is
it's
technology.
More of an interface between these devices.
Correct.
So at the end of the game on all of this, will we be able to, for example, take a let's say, a report that has been electronically compiled in a cruiser and be able to move it around electronically within the organization, also providing tracking as to who opened it, who looked at it, that type of thing. All that sort of control of that, I'll call it a record, be implemented as part of this?
I'll do my best to give you the answer, and I may lean to Gary. So with respect to the reports that are created in the vehicle or in the field, they're already automated through the mobile data terminal and the mobile report entry, and that goes right into our RMS through transcription, audit, and the different phases. So that's fully automated. We're looking at our physical records and our current records for the administrative functions where we can automate that. We are also looking at integration where we can utilize the open text environment to be able to crawl and search the Versadex system as authorized and as the security and the actual record allows it to be searched. We've mentioned about the electronic forms, and I know we had a discussion at the committee meeting. This also addresses the paper type or the current Adobe old forms to actually fully automate it and let it flow through intelligent workflow, electronic signatures from creation to end. There's an important reference right now, and I want to put a little bit of context to it. We have multiple files stored in various locations, whether they are sitting in multiple network drives, maybe in filing cabinets, etc. This allows us to streamline that process and have one authenticated copy instead of multiple copies. So we're looking at some of that innovation, because at the end of the day, when we enter a search criteria for a record, we're not be able to find that record, because that's where the knowledge within the organization exists. So we're looking to streamline that area. And then the last piece is we're looking at performing some email management solutions where we can actually, not having to archive a lot of emails in multiple locations, is to have an authenticated corporate record and manage it through its life cycle. So this request for capital is looking to optimize a lot of those efficiencies. And in our submission, we noted that this is a multi-year project, and it does align with two goals that were requested by the board we address.
So at the bottom line at the end of all of this, the paper forms, which manually were filled in, are going to be gone, and everything will be electronic.
So yes, I can answer that question. Yeah, that is the hope with the electronic forms, is that we can, they will be electronic and that they can go right across the service electronic. You had made the point earlier about the audit trail. This, through open text and ECM, it will give us a full audit trail.
So forms, for example, let's say there was an annual leave request form. I'm not sure whether that was on paper or not, but I'm just using it as an example. And that may not even exist. But if it did, where an officer originally filled that out by hand, he will now be able to do that on a terminal as a fillable form, electronically sign it, and there'll be a routing structure behind it based on who his sergeant is or whatever the case may be, and it automatically routes to him. That person says, yes, I agree with this, signs off on it, and again, there's a routing form once he signed on it, whether it ends up in HR or whether it goes to a divisional superintendent or inspector, whatever the case may be. But all of that will be there at the end of this process.
That's the hope. That's the exact structure that we're looking at. That's correct.
Okay, you used the word hope.
Yeah.
What am I looking at here? 50% success rate or 98?
Well, until we actually bring it in, Akram can probably speak to that, but we were just at a conference a couple weeks ago talking to these providers, and that's the actual expectation that we're hoping to bring in. We want these forms to be electronic. We want them to remain electronic, and we're looking at the workflow so they can go right across the service, and everybody looking at one copy of that form, not multiple copies.
Again, agreed there. And that should reduce a certain amount of demand on additional storage. If you're able to reduce it down to one image of the item and it's can be moved without creating 7 or 8 copies every time you touch it. The one thing I think the board would be a bit, say, disappointed if our success rate isn't high. So that's why I'm saying, like, if this is 50%, you're not making the mark on it.
If I may, our goal is to have not 100% success. But let me just clarify where we measure it. Anything that's within our control to actually do today with Adobe, we believe we will have 100% success. We have met with Waterloo Police, and we actually spent 2-3 hours looking at their electronic form solution, and they are quite pleased with it, and it is very successful. The ones that we cannot control or we cannot deem successful are the provincial forms that they have to download and print, and they may have to fill out and so forth. The whole objective of automation, and we've talked about digitization, is we are focusing on the mobility and the front line. If we can actually prevent a frontline officer to fill something on hand, having to go back to the office to print it so he can put it in the bin to go to his supervisor, this will allow us to actually keep him on the road, where we can allow them to have mobility from the car, perform all the duties, put it through the intelligent workflow with a digital signature, and then it gets handled one time. And that's really where we measure success as well.
Okay, thank you for that update.
Any other questions for Gary or any of this? Gary, I want to thank you for taking my calls this summer with the complaints I've had on this stuff. And when you came to us, 2 years has it been? Year? 2 years? We were told you're the best. So you have an image to keep up. So thank you. Any other comments on the budget? Okay, we have oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry, if I could just top up on the question that Member Bonham had with regards to the MTTs. In discussion with Lisa, the purchase of the MDTs will be debt finance. So that doesn't necessarily mean that you'll be approving the debt now or that the debt will be issued. It would mean that the project is approved and that the debt would be issued as expenditures are incurred. That approach would not have any impact on our operating or operations. Not sure if that helps or not.
So what does that mean for our capital budget for 2018? Can it be reduced and split or not?
So there really is no need to reduce and split it because it doesn't impact your operating budget. So for this one in particular, we wouldn't be transferring any funds from our operating budget. So I would suggest the preferred method would be to approve the whole $800,000, and Akram has the options when he's ordering them with the region and with our purchasing people to decide what the best method is for ordering. So if we only order $400,000 in 2018, only $400,000 debt will be issued, and then in 2019 another $400,000 would be issued if they orders more in 2019. But if the preferred method is to go $600,000, he could do $600,000, 2018 and 200 in the next year. So it just gives him the option for ordering without causing any impact on operating budgets here or at the region.
Okay, thank you.
Good with that? Okay, any other questions about the budget? Okay, we have a motion here and a seconder already for approving the budget, the 2018 capital budget of the Niagara Region Police at $4.6 million, that financing the amount of 4.6 be initiated, and that the 9-year capital forecast be received as a guideline for the development of future capital budgets. All those in favor, and I know Member Castle's also in favor, but carried. Thank you very much. Good job. Okay, the next is number 183, the NRPS Capital Projects Closeout Report. A mover and seconder, put that on the floor, please. Member Bonham, Member Ganzel. Comments or questions on this item? Anybody want to speak to this, or do you have any comments at all on this, Chief?
I don't have any comments. Thanks.
I won't touch that. Thank you. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Number 184. By the way, anybody that has, well, they've already left. Okay. Good. That's efficient. Thank you. Number 184, Memorandum of Understanding, the Mobile Crisis Rapid Response Team. A mover and seconder for this, please. Member Ganzel, Member Stewart. Comments or questions on this item? Member Ganzel.
Thank you, Chair. This one is, I mean, I like what we're doing here. I've heard nothing but good reports on the coast and also the MCERT project for a number of officers that I've run into in the last several months. Just one question, seeing of a service and the board is signing this. Has our solicitor had a chance to look at this?
Through Mr. Chair, it's highlighted on page 3 of the report. It has been reviewed by Mr. Woody McKay.
Defer to September.
Page 3.
Defer.
Sorry, I missed that one.
You okay? Okay. Any other comments or questions on this? Member Stewart.
Just a quick comment. Very supportive of this, as I think this is, again, inching towards that cooperation and work with other agencies. That's, you know, it's towards that hub model. It's towards everybody working together so that our citizens in need can be a service with. So I'm very supportive of this and glad to see it happening. Thanks.
Yeah, and I agree that this is nothing but good news. All those in favor? Carried. Item number 185, I'm asking for a motion to defer it to, from someone to defer it to September, as Member Barrick would like to address it at that time. Moved by Member Ganzel, seconded by Member Bonham. All those in favor? Carried on that one. Item 186, the PSB bylaw complaint process for board member conduct. A mover and seconder on this, please. Member Bonham, Member Stewart. Comments or questions on this item? Member Stewart.
I don't know if Woody's going to be in here for this one, but I'd asked him earlier, the intent of this is for...
Do you want me to go get Woody to come in or to comment, or no? Well, if you don't need him, it's your call.
You tell me maybe, but I was just saying that, that the intent of this complaint process is public complaint. It would not be other types of complaint, which might be member versus member complaint or whatever it is. But I thought it would be wise, if that's the intent, and what he seemed to indicate it was, is that we put that in the heading or whatever it is, that it's public complaint.
I don't have a problem with that, but I think we should get Woody to address it. Do you want to, I'm going to go get, I'll go get Woody. I'll be right back. Thank you. Okay, while that one's up, oh no, the rest is, that's it. Oh no, I'm sorry, one's being brought to public. So I'm going to switch over to item number 104, Special Investigation Unit case number, and that's to be going to public. A motion to move it into public. Can I have a mover and seconder for item C104? Member Ganzel, Member Bonham. Any comments? And the point of this one is to bring it to public. All those in favor? Carried. Okay, well, we saved a few seconds. That's it. Is there anything else, Deb? Is there any supplemental? Okay. Okay, when Woody comes back, we'll address that one.
They wanted to hear from you. I could have answered, but that's okay. I think it applies to me. Okay, well, you can bring that up in the meantime. Okay. So on this item, number 186, the complaint process,
I've got a motion from Member Bonham. Go ahead and say it, please.
Yes, Chair, given the depth and breadth of this and the ramifications, I'm going to suggest that we might defer until September so we can review more in depth what the issues are and compare and contrast possibly with what's going on in other jurisdictions. With all due respect, thank you.
A seconder for that? Member Stewart, all those in favor? Carried. Oh. Okay, that's it for public, Deb? Okay, that's it for the public portion of the meeting. Thank you very much.